Stop saying what the last
Very youthful. That's like me. Yeah.
Youthful for sure. Funky, I'm not so sure about that.
Feisty. Definitely feisty. Oh yeah. Yeah.
How'd you go?
Oh Hashem, I'm getting better every day.
Because he had his job.
One job, yes, Baruch Hashem.
So.
No, I'm saying, no, he had his job and then he got killed.
It's quite a big gamble, you know that? In the UK. Massive gamble.
If you were to be here, you would get rogalach. You had the thing about his daughter's bas mitzvah cake and some whiskey.
Oh, whiskey I can do. Rogalach, not so much.
This whiskey, I don't know if.
No, it's not that bad. They're going on the.
Ooh, give me some.
No, but
You want some?
Oh, that's nice. Who brought that?
Moshe brought it.
Oh.
Yehuda says you're not allowed. It's not your diet.
Tell him not to watch.
Don't worry too much, I think he said. Right.
The big gamble.
What's big gamble?
With the job.
Oh, that's the thing. Job for what, Moshe? Job for what? What job
So
for
it's
what?
back to the full amount. I was thinking, it's nothing to do with Chil Hashem. This year, Purim, we can't do anything which will cause hatred by the good. That's the bottom.
Anyway.
No, it's not true. The difference between hating and it's you're not allowed to cause hatred.
What's going on? Why?
So if you go in the streets with a flute and then
You're allowed to go on the street. No, they can't stop you going on the street.
anyway,
With the bottom down. It's a free country. Well, it's not anymore. It's a free state.
we're up to that Vav Modalef, 3 lines from the wider lines. Toshima, the end of the 3 lines. Toshima. Yesterday we started learning the sugya. Rav came along and told us that the rooftops and the upper stories in Yerushalayim, what's their status?
No good.
Oh, no.
Finishing that.
You can't do that. So we tried to bring many proofs and we rejected them all, and now we're coming with another proof. One has to remember that the Beis and the Beis Hamikdash was all built on hills, on a hill. And instead of the Azor being on a slope, the Azor was flat. And what happened was, there was many steps every so often. For example, there was steps between Nezas Yisroel and Nezas Noshim. There was a steps between the Beis and Nezas Yisroel and Nezas Noshim. There was a steps between the Heichal and Olam. That means there were many, many, many steps. The reason there were steps, if you're building something on a mountain, so what you do is you flatten it out, and then when it comes to a higher stage, you make steps to the higher platform. That's how it was. That was the picture of that base. The art school, actually, I saw one of them has a very nice diagram of that base, but you don't need to see the diagram at all for this sugya. The main thing is just to be aware that the Beis Hamikdash was built on different layers, and each layer had steps going up. According to Rav, as we just mentioned, rooftops and upper stories do not have kedusha. Says God, Toshima, halishkos habenuyos ba'kodesh. Chambers that were built inside the kodesh. That means in the area of the Azor. The entrance is from a chol, from a weekday spot. So, for example, you've got an entrance to a chamber. For example, many of the coastal tunnels have this. The entrance to the coastal tunnel is from a weekday place, from a cholintika place, from not kodeshtika place. But once you go into the chamber, you're going deeper and deeper and deeper. You're going underneath to a kodeshtika place. So what is the halacha? The halacha is, what's the halacha? What? Oh, toichen chol. Inside is chol. It's not kedusha. We got to say in kodesh, but the rooftop is kodesh. Now you just said Rav. What did Rav say? What was the statement of Rav? That rooftops and upper stories do not have kedusha. The floor, the rooftop is the same height as the floor of the Azor. It's very simple. You've got a chamber built into the Beis. The Beis is like a mountain. We said that Azor is a high level. So you've got a chamber going built in. The rooftop of the chamber is the same height as the floor of the Azor.
Exactly the same height.
Why?
You've got that ground.
Yeah, but we're talking about on the rooftop. We mean when you're standing on the roof. So when you're standing on the roof, it is Kaddish. If they were built from the Beis Hamikdash outwards. I mean, you dug from the Beis Hamikdash and you build into the Chol. Upsuchis la Kodesh, the entrance is la Kodesh. Teuchen Kodesh. We can go say in the Chol, but the rooftop is weekday. We is like a data, we should go say in Shomon Karka. If we're talking about where the roof is the same level as the ground, as then this is considered tunnels. Picture it. You've got a Beis, you've got a tunnel which you're digging from the Azor, and it's going deep, deep, far away. So then the tunnel has Kedusha. This is a very important principle to remember. The Kedusha of a tunnel is dependent on what?
Space?
No, the entrance ways. Or the entrance ways. If the entrance comes from the Azor, then even if you dig far, far, far out into the whole thing's got Kedusha. The roof is got the Kedusha of the place that it is. The tunnel roof. Yes, you can. Let's say, for example, there's a tunnel underneath from here to Berinu, so you can stand on the tunnel roof, on the road, on the ground. That has the Kedusha of the place. Now, before we asked about the rooftops, we answered, we're talking about where it's on the level of the Azor. Now we're asking that if we're talking about underground, so it's considered a tunnel. We have a principle from Rabbi Yochanan that the tunnels were never become Kodesh, neither tunnels. Whether they were open in the Kodesh, whether they were open in the Chol, which is a stereotype. Where the entrance is in the Beis. That means the Gemara reconciles that when Rabbi Yochanan said there's no Kedusha, we're talking about where the entranceway is from the Beis. When the entranceway is from the Azor, there is Kedusha. You can have a tunnel underneath the Beis Hamikdash itself that is unholy. How can you have such a thing? How can you have a tunnel underneath the Beis Hamikdash that's not unholy? It's like, the Gemara having thought is not likely to have such a big tunnel. The more understood that the tunnel was from the Azor. And we just said that the entrance starts from the Azor, because you must remember, you've got the Beis Hamikdash, the Azor, which is the courtyard, and then you've got the Beis. The more understood, most likely, Rashi explains, is that the tunnel starts from the Azor. So why is it not Kodesh? We're talking about where indeed it's open all the way from the Beis. So a tunnel from the Beis, which goes all the way into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, is not Kodesh. There was, yes. But just for the reference, because of this, remember we discussed how many Yidden there were in the Beis Hamikdash. Got quite busy with it. It's difficult. Esther Kedusha is going to it. How many Yidden was the most that ever came that the Gemara mentions? What's the highest number the Gemara mentions of a Korbanos Pesach? Korbanos Pesach. No, how many Korbanos Pesach? We said that every Korban Pesach has at least about 10 people. How many Korbanos Pesach was 1.2 million, the Gemara says. Now, how many groups are there? 400,000 in a group. Now, which area? We worked it out on the Beis, 500 amos for 500 amos. We worked it out. Remember, 25,000 square feet, etc. 25,000 square meters. That was a fundamental mistake, my mistake. And really, the shechting could only take place not in Beis, not in Ezras Noshim, only in Ezras Yisroel and parts of Ezras Kohanim. So now remeasure that. The Ezras Yisroel was only 10 amos wide by 135 amos long. So it's 1,350 square amos. It's tiny areas. 350 amos, square amos. So we're talking about.
How many?
We're talking about. We said 400,000, and even more about the equivalent of about about 100 amos squared.
You said the size of
I know, but that was based on the cheshbon that they could check on the Beis. Based on that's right, 50 by 50 meters. 50 by 50 meters. How big is this room? Do you know how big is this room? How many meters? No, this is 50 meters by 50 meters because it's 1,300 hours.
It's 20 square meters. It's 13 by 13. 11.
Is that what it is? So it's about 30 by 11 so it's about more than 4 because 30 you have to times it. It is 16 of these, 16 a bit less, but 12 of these to fit in 400,000 people with the Korbanos Pesach. That's right. Jewish day hall is not 50 hours, 50 meters by 50 meters, I believe it might be. 50 meters by 50 meters.
No.
Okay, we'll get
50 meters is half a football pitch. The football pitch is about 70 to 80 meters.
Is that all it is?
Well, there you go. The length is
Tosha B'Av. Okay, let's go weiter. V'gaga Kodesh. The Beis says the roof was Kodesh. A kasha on Rav, because Rav says that roof is not Kodesh. But Tispa, does it make sense that it's literally? You can't eat there, not kalim. When a kasha gaga Kodesh said the rooftop is Kodesh. The top was not Kodesh. For two very minor things, they used the rooftop. One thing, which was two. There was a measurement rod called an ammer. An ammer. What's the purpose of a measuring rod? Because whenever you needed to know if something is an ammer, you had a measuring rod, which was an ammer. Besides for that, they had two measuring rods, which were slightly bigger than the ammer of Moshe Rabbeinu. We had it before. Yes, we had it before. One was half a finger bigger, and one was a full finger bigger. The purpose was, does anyone remember why we had ammers which were bigger?
In the error, when we had
For error, to explain better. Very good. Let's say I employ a builder, and I pay him, he asks me for 100 shekel, I'm working for Beis Mikdash, and I say to him, will you put in a wall for 100 amas long? I'll pay you 100 shekel for 100 amas. And he only builds 99, because they're hard to measure. Because I paid him out for 100. So we gave him a long measuring rod, and we said to measure with this, and that way, if he went a bit less, he would still be within the correct measure. The place where they would keep these two measuring rods was in the rooftop. So it wasn't Kaddish. Rav is right, correct, that the rooftop is not Kaddish, that you can't eat Kaddish. It is Kaddish that you're allowed to store the measuring rods there. Says the Gemara, the Tanan. Shnei Amo Yisrael with Shushan Abiro. Shushan Abiro mentioned in the Megillah. Why would there was a special room in the second Beis Hamikdash called Shushan Abiro? The reason it was called Shushan Abiro because the person who allowed Klal Yisrael to build the second Beis Hamikdash was called Yomi. To remind us of gratitude that he helped us, we made a picture of Shushan, an engraving of Shushan in one of the rooms of the Beis Hamikdash. Had an engraving of the picture of Shushan to remind us of gratitude that he helped us build the Beis Hamikdash. They would put the two measuring rods on two different corners, one in the south, northeast, and one in the southeast. The northeast one was half a finger wider. How many fingers are they now? Does anybody know? When he said 20, 30 times and started over. How many fingers in the hammer? Look at your chart. 24. The 6.
And he was a division of 12.
Oh. So it's a half a finger wider. Well, that means 1 foot, 2% wider. 2% longer, I should say. Was another half a finger. This is the was the 24th longer. Why did they have when we paid them? We paid them with the. That means when they asked for price, we would take the small one. We would say to them, "Look, you have to pay according to the small one," but they would have to then give us with a big rod. If you need to make a bigger rod, why do you have to have two different ones? If it was made out of silver and gold, let's say we asked them to make a silver table or a silver bowl. So there, since it's very expensive, we did not be so machmi on them to take a very big rod. So I only asked a bit longer, 2%. No, again, if you're a builder and you're being employed by the Beis Hamikdash to make a silver item, so then you were only expected to give 2% more than your original quote in order that you shouldn't by mistake give less and be over me'ilah. But if it was a stone building, you were expected to give 4% more, a bit more than 4%, it's one etzbah of 24, a bit more, to thereby to avoid the Isur me'ilah. So the Maskonas HaSugya is that the rooftops was not Kaddish, and therefore you cannot eat Korban Pesach there. Tanan, Hachalono is the windows, but over Achim, the thickness of the walls, Kilifnim, it's got a Kedusha like inside. Now we had a question. We just said a second ago that what? The rooftop is not Kaddish. If the rooftop is not Kaddish, why would the top of the wall be Kaddish? And why would the windows be Kaddish? It's the same height as the Azor. If you've ever been in the old city and other places, have a room which is level as the ground. So therefore, the window has got kedusha. Why is the window got kedusha? Because it's not above ground. What? You can have in England, but you have like a half a basement where the window is the same. The window's framework is flush with the ground. That's a good word. I don't know how many of you have been to Eaton Park. If you go to Eaton Park, there's a very big house there. One of my properties which I own. Eaton Hall. And in front of it, there's a wall called the Ha-Ha. I don't know if any of you have noticed it. No, after that, there's a wall called the Ha-Ha or something. The wall can only be seen from one direction. From the other direction, you can't see it. With one area, it's flush with the ground, and in the other way, it's actually a wall. Right, yes, we had it, but do you know what I'm talking about in Eaton Park? Have you seen it?
I will see it.
The reason they did it, if you're interested, is they didn't want cows and sheep to get onto their lawn. On the other hand, they didn't want to spoil the view that you should have a wall there. So they make the ground go up gradually, and then there's a drop in the ground, so therefore they can't get on. So what happens is you don't actually see a wall from one direction, you just don't see a wall. It's called a ha-ha, that's what it's called. You've never seen it? You've never seen it?
Go to that house, there's a sign with like a plaque there saying this is the ha-ha wall.
That's how it's designed, that's right, exactly. I've read it from George. You don't know what I'm talking about. I especially thought of an example that people, you're aware of it, Sean. You ever go to Eaton Park ever? Yeah, every summer holidays without it. You know what's about the ha-ha? The wall around there, the wall.
Oh, the cycle that you can't see from.
That's right, it's shadows. Fine. So now, that's right, that's what you'll do. That is what we're talking about over here. So the wall is flush with the ground, and therefore, it is not, it's got kedusha. But a wall which is not flush with the ground does not have kedusha. Now that's called Bar Shur. Literally means the son of a wall. It's a rampart in English. A rampart is something to support a wall. When Hashemach destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, he destroyed the walls and the ramparts. The wall and the supports of the wall. That means what they would sometimes do is they would make the ground go higher up to the wall in order to support the wall. Hashemach destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, he destroyed everything, the walls and the supports of the walls. But that is the walls which have got kedusha. But a normal wall, if you're standing on the walls, if you're walking on the wall of Yerushalayim, does it have kedusha? No. You cannot eat your kodshim kalim while you're standing on the walls. Yesterday I mentioned, Rabbi Yasha finished off the Shiur. Rabbi Yasha asked the question, how could the burning korban Pesach? I saw something answering. A burning korban Pesach, Mochim kedushas, in the Durabanon, they were meikol legabe the rooftops. Okay. New topic. We're going to have a fundamental machlekes here, and it's tricky because it is delicate, the machlekes. The Torah says you mustn't take the korban Pesach out from one group to another. This halacha, there's a fundamental machlokes as to what does the Torah mean. Does the Torah mean that you are not allowed to take the korban Pesach and split it into two groups? That means, let's say we all decide to bring korban Pesach together, and then we have a falling out. So half of us decide to eat from that side of the room, half is the other side of the room. Point to one time, you can't do it. You have to eat all together. The other man says, no, there's no problem with eating in two separate groups. There's another machlokes. Once you've chosen to eat with one group, can you walk to be with the other group? That means, that means the two machlokes are interdependent. The Torah says don't split. What does the Torah mean don't split? Does it mean lechatchila, don't split the korban Pesach into two groups? Or lechatchila you can't split into two groups? And then what is the issa? The issa is that once you're in one place, you can't go to another place. Our Mishnah holds you're allowed to have two groups. You're allowed to. But once you're in one group, you're not allowed to go to the other group. So let's say, for example, all of us bring korban Pesach together, right? And then we decide, you'll eat from that side of the room, you eat the other side of the room, and you're enjoying a piece of meat, and suddenly you say to me, I've got a question on our God, and you want to walk across the room, you're allowed to, according to this Mishnah? No, not allowed to. Ad kedei kach, you'll passel the korban Pesach by doing so. You can't. What about turning around to face me? That's the Mishnah discusses. Two groups eat in the same house. I'm really sorry, my house is very dry. I just get a drink. One second.
It's made to stop the view that when you look from the castles. So one of the things.
So the Mishnah says you're not allowed to. Mishnah says that they turn away from each other. Sorry, the Mishnah says they turn away from each other. So there's one group on this side, they face that side. One group faces that side, they face that side, and we split up. Why in the circle?
Usually each like the group, you don't line up in a wall each round.
No, it's about two groups, one that side, one
Usually
side.
when you eat,
Yes.
you eat in a circle, you put the food in the middle and you eat round like
No, so that's one group. There's two groups of it. They're split into two groups.
So you can't put it after the back to each other.
That means they're not supposed to intermingle, not supposed to. The hamecha be'emtza, and we put the kettle in the middle as a mechitza. That means you can put the kettle in the middle and it's not a problem. Now, when the shamash comes to pour, there's a waiter. The waiter, let's say, joins one of the groups because he wants to also eat. So let's say join groups A. He eats from group A. Now he needs to serve group B. He has to be very careful not to have anything in his mouth because we just said you're not allowed to walk from group A to group B. So he has to make sure he has to close his mouth and not eat at all until he comes back to his group and then he can eat again.
2 kettles.
Why 2 kettles?
One for each group then.
No, because you don't eat by the kettle. You can take water from the kettle.
Why just have each group of their own and you don't have to worry about
No, the Mishnah is being mechadish. You're allowed to put the kettle in the middle, even though that emphasizes it's 2 groups. Even if it's a hekal, don't mind splitting. But kala, the Gemara says, are embarrassed to eat in front of public. So even if she should eat with group A, she can turn from group A and eat privately, and that's not considered walking from away from the group. The Gemara explains more. Again, the Chinuch says that it's all got to do with the Nechayim. Poor people, when they get a little bit of food, what's the first thing they do? They send some back to the family and friends because they know the family and friends might not have anything to eat. A rich person doesn't think about other people. He just sits and eats, and he enjoys his meal because he knows everybody else also has. It's all, again, the answer is the cost of the Torah says so. Once the Torah says so, you can find reasons for it. This is what the Torah says. It says, if you read the passage very carefully, bottom is plural or singular? Plural. Yochlu is plural. Oisoi is singular, bohem is plural. So therefore the passage says the houses which they eat it. You can eat it, which is one common Pesach, in 2 separate groups. You might have thought if that's the case, I could eat in 2 separate groups. Let me move from one group to the other. Let's say the waiter was roasting the meat, and while he was roasting the meat, he got peckish, so he nibbled a bit at the meat. Now, is he allowed to eat the meat anywhere else? No, because if he eats the meat anywhere else, he's eating in 2 separate places. So that's the end of it. He can't eat anywhere else except by where he roasted it. Why? No, because he's not split into 2 groups. So that's his group. So if he's wise, when he starts nibbling at the Korban Pesach while he's roasting it, he should eat his full amount because he's not going to be allowed to eat afterwards with other group. If the people around want to be nice to him, what should they do to him? Come and eat by the roasting place. Again, the mission of the Beis, the shit is like this. You're allowed to eat Korban Pesach in 2 groups. That means you're allowed to decide we're splitting this Korban Pesach into 2 groups. But you're not allowed to move from one group to the next. Not allowed to move from one group to the next. Rav Shimon is exactly the opposite. You can eat in 2 separate places. That means you're allowed to eat in group A and then go to eat group B. Allowed to split it up. Say he holds, you're not allowed to split the Korban Pesach. You have to eat the Korban Pesach in one place. That means the group have to choose a place, and that's the place they all eat together. Afterwards, you're allowed to walk around with it because there's no din. This is a question which comes up many times in Shas. It's very good to have it clear. Everybody who's read the Sefer Torah knows that the Sefer Torah has no vowels inside it. But there is a tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu how to read it. It's not we make it up. The Nekudas in the Torah were told by Moshe Rabbeinu. So that is Mikvah, the way it's read. Mesirus is the way it's spelled. Now, if you look in the Pasuk, it says, where is it? The Pasuk says, Beis echad yeyochel. The word yeyochel is read yeyochel, it shall be eaten. That is the way it is vowelized. That's the way it is read. Ye'ochel is referring to the korban or to the person. Does anybody know? It is the korban. It is Ye'ochel, it shall be eaten. Referring to the korban, Pesach shall be eaten in one place. From here we learn that you're not allowed to split the korban Pesach into two. That is Shittas Reb Shimon. Beis echad Ye'ochel, it shall be eaten. The korban Pesach shall be eaten in one place and one place only. B'Shein Kin Rabbi Yehuda, he says Yesh Eim leMesirus. How it was brought down, the letters, not the way it was read. If you'd have no vowels and you would see the letters Yud, Aleph, Chof, Lamed, what would you read it? Yoichal, which would refer to the eater. Yoichal, the person who's eating it has to stick to one place. So therefore, that's the Machlekas of Yehuda. Rashi, you have to add dots in Rashi. The word Yoichal, Yoichal Ksiv, it's the third line from the bottom of Pei Vav Aleph. That it's written as Yoichal. Yoichal means it shall be eaten. So again, Yoichal means you shall eat it. You shall eat it. So the Machlekas of Yehuda Saviyesh Em Le'Mesirus. Go, let's do it again. Second line from Pei Vav Beis. Yehuda Saviyesh Em Le'Mesirus is how we got it. The letter says Yoichal, so you have to eat it in one place. But the Beikon Pesach can be in a number of places. It's how we read it, which is Yochel, the Korban Pesach can't be split. Now the Gemara brings two cases which will be a Machlekas of Yehuda and Shimon. We were sitting down in one group. Imagine sitting down in one group. All of us eating together. Suddenly somebody came, COVID conscious. I put a screen between us all. You can eat in two groups. According to Rabbi Yehuda, they're allowed to split the korban Pesach. You can eat it because now by putting a screen down the middle, we have split it. And therefore, if you can eat it in two groups, that's fine. That you can't eat the korban Pesach in two separate places. Because by putting a screen up, now we're eating the korban Pesach in two separate places. And that you can't do. So therefore, it comes out that you can actually spoil the entire korban Pesach by just putting a screen up. The Gemara says similarly, if they were sitting, when they start mechitza b'nem, that means originally there was mechitza down the middle, and suddenly the mechitza fell down. You're allowed to eat in two separate places again. You're allowed to eat in two separate places, and you're allowed to eat it. Now it's considered two separate places. Rashi explains that when there was a mechitza originally, and see different views, and therefore it's become a different area, and therefore if you hold that you're allowed to eat in two separate places, then you're allowed to continue eating even though the screen fell down. You have to stop eating because now it's become a new room. So therefore, we've got machleikas whether the mitzvah korban Pesach is to eat it in one room. That means, are you allowed to split the korban Pesach originally? Our Mishnah is Shittas of Yehuda, you're allowed to split it originally, but then you're not allowed to go from place to place. Shimon says you're not allowed to split the korban Pesach originally, but you are allowed to eat from place to place. Now, what the Gemara says, all what we just explained now, these two cases, Yosef Kahana Kaposh Mifshat, he held that all of this was obvious. He held that it was a question. He held that moving screens, adding screens and taking away screens do not necessarily create a new room and do not necessarily create a new chabur. So he said, he asked us a shaila, we passed that Rashi, and therefore one should not eat the korban Pesach if either a screen became up or came down in the middle of the meal. If you start a meal and the screen came down, you can't eat in case now it's considered like two separate places, and you can't eat, and if it comes up as well, you can't, because if you move from place to place. Hakal is allowed to turn a face. Because she's embarrassed. So now, there's Tosfos, the second taste on the page, is too much the thing that why does Mishnah say a kala turns her face? What about other people? What happens if I'm embarrassed to eat publicly? Am I allowed to turn my face? Tosfos has two answers. Tosfos says one answer is that a kala is obligated. As near as a kala is obligated to turn her face when she's eating. Another answer is that Tosfos says that really it's not so good because this is going on our Mishnah. Our Mishnah holds not allowed to move from place to place. And we're talking about a kala that started eating facing everybody and in the middle got embarrassed and then she turns her face. So you would have thought that that's considered moving like the Shabash. The Chiddush is that it's okay. So there's two halachim in Tosfos. What's the story of the kala? Now the Gemara tells us a nice light story. Avuna Beidam Nosan Ikle Beidam Nachbe by Yitzchak. Avuna came to the fire family of Nachbe. Omule, they said to him, what is your name? Omalu Rav Huna, my name is Rav Huna. Rashi is the whole shtick of Torah. If you come to a place, should you introduce yourself as Rav so-and-so or not, or Huna? Because, he says, on one hand, there's a certain arrogance by introducing yourself as Rav, as we'll see in a minute. On the other hand, if you don't, and then people treat you as Zilzul, then you'll be machshel them in Mazaz and Talmud Chacham. So it brings a whole nidden about it. Omu, they said to him, Nesim Rav, pull your sit on a bed. In those days, sitting on a bed was a sign of honor. Most people sat on a bench. Yosef, he sat down on the bed. Again, they were upset with him because why? He should have said, no, I'm not choshev enough to sit on the bed. I'll sit on the bench. But he didn't. He took the liberty to sit on the bed. Yovelei Kasser offered him a cup to drink. Kiblei b'chad zim, they immediately accepted, which again, they were upset with him. Why would they accept it? They're upset with him. You should refuse. If I say to you, like a piece of cake, the first time you say, no, thank you. The second time, no, thank you. The third time, you say, yes, please. But not the first time. But Shossi betrayed Zimni, drank it down in 2 gulps. The Gemara explains that they were upset with that as well. And he drank it in front of them without turning his face. Omuli. They said to him, after seeing all this strange behavior, my time and Rav Huna, why are you called Rav Huna if you don't behave like a Rav? Omalu Bala Shemani, that's my name. Rashi very surprisingly says Rav Huna was called from the day he was a child, Rav Huna. Everybody asks, Ali, let me just have a good shot. What's mean Rav Huna was called as a child, Rav Huna? Others say, what? That the Beis, is that true? It's a strange name to give at the Beis. Okay. Another explanation the Meiri says is that he said, I deserve the name because I have received smicha. Others say that he was trying to say that I've earned the right. Okay, they said that's my name. Why is it that when we offered you a bed, you sat? You should have refused. Say, whatever the owner says to you should do, chutz mitzvah. Now, the words chutz mitzvah are in brackets. And here you have a list of mefolshim, on and on and on, Meiri, Tzlach, Sfas Emes, all discussing are the words chutz mitzvah included or not. The Sfas Emes says a very, very interesting thing. I saw it in Saitak, it's quite exciting. He says that really it was never included in the Gemara. Whatever the Rabbi says to do. But when they saw the story about Kamsa and the terrible ramifications when they kicked him out, what it calls the Churban, they decided they have to change it, and they added the words chutz mitzvah, except for going out. What?
It's hard to go out. Yeah, if we just got it to walk off.
Yeah, so he said, whatever the Beis tells you to do, chutz mitzvah, that, okay. The Ben Yehuda says, say refers to going out of this world. You're not mechuyev to listen to Beis if he's going to tell you to do an aveil. So therefore, chutz mitzvah, except from going out of doing anything which would take you out of this world.
91 things, huh?
What's the 91 things?
Say, no, I don't know. It could be a joke.
There's many, many remozim to all the things. Okay. Why did you accept the cup immediately? One refuses by a cotton, but not by a great person. Because that great person, the Rav says to you, be the chazam, then you come misav. Where do we see that from? Does anybody know? Where do we see misav in the garden? No. Avam and Loit. The Avam asked the guest, come, and he straight away came. Loit said, look, they said to him, look, we're chayv noling. So Rashi says, ladies, I don't know that's my time is just a bit tracing. Why did you drink it 2 times? Omalu, the Tanya, if you drink a cup in one go, as a gargon, that shows greediness. Shnaim, if you drink it in 2 gulps, that's good. Drinking it sipping shows haughtiness. There are those who are very, very machmir, the Seder night and other times, to drink every cup that they drink in 2 gulps. I've seen people very, very machmir about it. What?
You don't just get drunk.
And you take a cup of water. How many cups to drink it? You drink a cup. Say on Friday night when you take Kiddush, how many cups to drink? You got Kiddush wine. It's here. It says that the Eretz is doing 2 cups. My tamalo hadus apoch. What? 2 gulps. What did I say? 2 cups. 2 gulps. My tamalo hadus apoch. Why need it in your face? Amalu kalo ifeches b'ne'atran. Only a kala needs to items. Because in one gulp shows that you're like desperate for the drink. Sipping shows that you're such an indulgent person. You've got loads of time. No, 3 is Gaiva, 2 is 3 is Gaiva. Vishmo Babis Ikle Be of Shimon Babis when the Kunya, he went to Shimon Kunya's house. The Obele Kas, they gave him a cup, Kible Bechad Zimna, Vishosi Bechad Zimna. Omule, he drank it in 1 cup. Omule, Sovlama, Shis Kisvas Achas as a gargon. That shows greediness. Omalu, Lo Yomu, they never said that because of cotton. You gave me a very small cup. Yenoch Mosuk, and your wine is particularly sweet. But crazy Vechova, and I have a big stomach. The Gemara in Bava Metzia tells us that Yisroel Rabbi Yosi was particularly fat. So therefore, he could drink an entire cup in 1 go. Okay, new topic. Here we have Machlokes Rashi Tosfos what the story is. According to Rashi, this is all to do with waiters. That 3 people come in, and 1 person goes out. According to Rashi, the waiter does not need to start serving until there's 3 people there. Let's say we called a meal for 8 o'clock in the evening, and there's only 3 people, there's 2 people there. The waiter can say, I'm not starting to work. There's only 2 people. I'm going to start waiting on people. I'll wait until there's at least 3 people. But at the end of the meal, even if there's only 1 person left, he's still obligated to serve him. It's only if they came in the normal time. That means if 1 person is staying past the normal time of the meal, or 3 people came before the time of the meal, then he does not need to serve them. And it's only that they told the waiter that this is how we're going to do it. The last people at the meal, they have to pay extra for the meal because they've kept the waiter there longer. And the last person at the meal must pay extra, give a tip to the waiter. So according to Rashi, this whole Gemara is how to deal with a waiter. Let's go to our Mishnah. It talks about a waiter. That means it doesn't have to start serving until there's at least 3 people, and only if it's the normal time of the meal. And when they leave, he has to serve every last person, as long as it's within the normal time of the meal, as long as they warned him, this is how it's going to be. But the last one has to give a big tip, and the last couple have to pay him extra. Tesis doesn't agree with Rashi at all. Tesis says we're talking about a completely different topic. We're talking about a situation where we all decided to bring the Korban Pesach together. And then what happened was, I want to start eating my Korban Pesach, but you're not around. Can I start eating? That's what we're talking about. Let's see Tesis. Second part of Tesis. I said the waiter to look for everybody. If there's 3 of us who get together to the Korban Pesach, we can start eating. If they were there and they left, what? Why? Doesn't matter if there's 3 people, you're okay. According to Tosfos, it's discussing the halachas of eating Korban Pesach. You have to wait for everybody to be together. I'd very much like to start the next Mishnah because it's a very, very long daf tomorrow, very, very long daf. And we do have the poem coming up, and we've got quite a few long dafim. So we'll just do 5 minutes, and then we'll have a few minutes to think. The whole of the perek discusses one particular question. That is like this. When we have a group of people, I mean, obviously there's lots of side topics, but we have a group of people. So what happens is we shech the Korban Pesach. I don't need to ask every one of my little children, do you want to join with Korban Pesach? I can shech on their behalf. But many times you have people where we're not sure who they want to join with. For example, a woman. Does she want to join with her husband or with her father? Right? If you've got Yosemim, we've got Apotropsin, that's what's the word, administrators. If you've got 2 administrators and both shech Korban Pesach, who do they Yosemim eat? Says the Mishnah. Or Isha is married, she Beis Malo, if she's married, Shochat Oleo Bailo, Shochat Oleo Avio, both the father and the husband both shechted Korban Pesach with her in mind. Toicha Mishal Bailo, we assume she wants to eat from her husband, and therefore she eats only from her husband. But if the very first Yom Tov she was by her father's house, as we will see, that was the minig, that they would always go to the father's house for the first Yom Tov. So she can choose whichever one she wants. The first Yom Tov, when she goes back to her father's house, she's allowed to choose whichever one she wants because we do not know who she's more connected to. Person is a Yosem and he's got two administrators, he can choose whichever one he wants. You can't eat from either of them because neither of them have got right to shecht for him because he's an eved for another person. He can't eat from his Rabbi because his Rabbi is not going to shecht Korban Pesach for an eved. So our Mishnah discusses three kinds of circumstances where you have a suffix. A woman who's got a husband and a father, a Yosim has got two administrators and an eved. And the Mishnah says in some of the cases that they can pick and choose by a Yosim. There must be prayer. What? You can't go without those masters. That's right. Yeah, the more discusses exactly what we're going to do. The more discusses who or how we're going to join him up, who we're going to join up with. Shmas, maybe we'll have Kananis together. Shmas, not yesh breva. There must be breva. Why must there be breva? Because if there's no breva means retroactive designation. Determination. That means the father and the husband both shechted Korban Pesach, and yet, when does the woman decide in the having of the Gemara? When does she decide? When she comes to sit down to eat. But when they shechted it, the halach is Korban Pesach has to be shechted for the designated people.
That means you can have half your man in one and half in the other.
The Gemara says you can't. So it must be yesh breva. That what happens is that when she decides in the evening who she wants to eat by, we say retroactively that's what she was designated. Says the Gemara, my voitze b'shar shchita, she has to decide at the moment of shchita. So let's see the top two. Says this my voitze b'shar shchita, v'dafka piro b'shar shchita. Aber lo piro eino yecheles lo mishal zeh v'lo mishal zeh. If a woman doesn't decide at the time of the shechita, then she doesn't get to eat any Korban Pesach at all. She has to Pesach Sheni, correct. A normal woman, if she doesn't think about it, so she's included in her husband. A normal wife. But the first Yom Tov, she has to decide. It's important these halachas. I tell you, I was looking today in Mishnah Vur, and halachas Shlach Manos. The Mishnah Vur says that if you want to do the right thing, you should tell your wife to designate. I try to do it every year. Tell your wife, one Mishlach Manos should be from her, and one Mishlach Manos should be for you. Many times you give it to your neighbors. So what happens is you give Mishlach Manos. You never designate one Mishlach Manos should be your wife's mitzvah, one should be your mitzvah. It's two separate mitzvahs. The answer is you have to designate which one is for which. It's no good. But the ever you are yoitzim because the halacha is you're allowed to give Mishlach Manos as a partnership. But Mishum Zan and Rashi both write quite strong tshuvas about this. One each. One of each one should give them Mishach Manos. Also, every year, it's very hard to remember. I tell my wife, this money is yours. What I do is she picks it up, it's her money now. And now I become a shliach for morning. Then I take that money and I drop it off by the wall. Many people say, okay, this is Mishum Matalis Tev Yonim. What about your wife? What about your children? You've got a child who's 8 or 9. He's also Mishum Matalis Tev Yonim. The answer is you have to say, this is for my child, his mitzvah Matalis Tev Yonim, or you get your child to do it himself. The Mishnah says that what? That women the first Yom Tov like to be by the fathers. She eats by her father. The Mishnah says the first Yom Tov she can pick and choose. Here it says she always eats by her father. Some women are constantly wishing to run home, and such a woman the first Yom Tov she only eats from her father, and some people are not. A kala is found to be perfect in the father-in-law's house. She's running. She wants to tell her father. In the olden days, this is very important. People are not aware of this. And then when we came to Eretz, we all got an inheritance. Every family got an inheritance. Who got the Yerusha? Only sons, not daughters. When you got married, you brought your wife into your father's home. Nowadays, it's the opposite. You usually end up in your wife's, in Shver's house, much more than your parents' house. But nowadays, wasn't like that. So what would happen is, when you got married, you brought the kala. The kala would always live at home she got married, she would move into her father-in-law's house. Once she moved into her father-in-law's house, then she would have to integrate. If the family liked her, she would be very, very proud of that fact, because then she was accepted by her new family. And then she was always desperate to go home to tell her family, I fitted in, they accepted me. So in such a case, the first Yom Tov, she always wants to eat from her father because she's desperate to tell the father. But in a normal case, if she's not so keen, she's not interested, then she's going to pick and choose. Right, we're up to ksiv. It's not kedich ksiv, it's ksiv. You have to be magiet. And from then on, it's Agadita. The whole of tomorrow is going to be a very lot of Agadita. Fascinating Gemara. Yeah, it's amazing Gemara. Unbelievable. What did you say, Shah said?
We're having the time.
Right.
You want loads, right?
Do they? Arabs? I never knew. But how do you know it's not in the wife's house? Mazel tov, Suli.
Mazel tov.
If you come quickly, you get a birthday kit. It's a
He's not here. He doesn't get.